Welcome to Skin and Soul. I'm Gwenm Carsley, a transformational body, sex, and soul coach, and I'm inviting you on a bold, unfiltered journey into the heart of our humanity through the lens of eros. This is where we strip away the shame, dive into the unspoken, and embrace the wild, raw truth of our desires. Together, we'll crack open the taboo, uncover our deepest intimacies, and awaken the pulse of our sexual essence. Because real transformation, it's messy, it's thrilling, and it's oh so delicious. Buckle up, loves. Skin and Soul Beyond the Pale starts in 3, 2, 1. Let's go. Hello and welcome back. I'm Gwenm. I'm your host of Skin and Soul on Transformation Talk Radio, and I'm also a body, sex, and soul coach and the creator of Loveology. And I want to welcome you here today. I am popping my virtual cherry, showing up live. Solo. Oh my God, I can feel my heart pumping because, it's always easier to fuck it up completely live, no edits, etc. But welcome here. We're going to be talking about wiring for love and imprinting aliveness. And so just beginning to talk about how we are imprinted in our love, our sexuality, our eros. And I want to start by saying, and I think we all know this, that love is messy. That showing up in love well takes a balanced expression of holding like a scaffolding and having this beautiful breath and wind move in between. And some of you might recognize that as the scaffolding being in the masculine or the yang, and the feminine being the yin of movement and fluidity. And we all have different names for love, different expressions and expectations of love, how we receive it, how we give it, how we want to receive it, and how we want to give it, that we play in this choreography together. But underneath all of that is a much, much simpler truth, which is that we are the essence of love. And I'm not saying that as some kind of bumper sticker or, I think it's very popular these days to be putting Post-it notes everywhere saying, I love myself, which is a beautiful practice, and I'm not dissing it by any means. But to go deeper into the nervous system so that you can really experience love in ways that don't carry expectation, does have boundaries, but that this love is so deep and encompasses so much more than what we usually equate with love. So this work is all about clearing out the gunk that keeps us from remembering. And I want to start with talking about the soul, or what I'm going to equate with the core essence here for those of you who don't believe in a soul. But the core essence within us is immutable. It's unchangeable. So if you sit very still, go beneath your stories, beneath your breath, there's a part of you that never changes. And while every other part of you, your identity, as you move through life, as you move through transformations, and that's another buzzword that tends to go around these days, is that we're always looking for some massive transformation. But we are, if we're doing it well, or always growing, we are shedding our skins. And I think most of us are familiar with the quote, "I think, therefore I am." And I want to take it a little bit further, or my own rendition of it, which is, I sense, I feel, therefore I am. Because whether you are blind, deaf, in a wheelchair, each of us has a very unique and specific way of how we filter the world through our soma, through our existence, through our experience. And it's from very, very early on that filter learns love, that filter learns fear, and our sexuality is imprinted. And so tonight I'm braiding these 3 threads of love, eros, and soul, or your core essence, into this one beautiful fabric. And I'm going to bring in some personal stories as reflections and mirrors back. I'm going to bring in some poetry, but also some practical tools that you can apply in your own life to tell your own, to be able to rewire so that you can live the story that you actually want to write and live. And we're going to keep coming back to the body because it's in the body where it all lands. It is in the body where the felt sense exists, which is the mind, the heart, and the wisdom that lives in your body. So recently, I just started taking Tai Chi. It's really new to me. I've been wanting to do it forever. But it's this beautiful example of the scaffolding metaphor, where the arms look very, very fluid, like water, effortless. So when you're watching from the outside, it looks like nothing is happening. But below, the legs are rooted. The pelvis is steady. And there is an active stillness. And this is where love lives in the body. It is a structure that lets the wind blow through and move through. Because without rooted legs, without a scaffolding, love turns to grasping or escape. And without movement, without the flow, we calcify, we rot. Right? So we need that growth. We need that expansion. And the art of loving is in both. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how wiring first begins and through my own life. And for those of you who have paid attention before and know a little bit of my upbringing and so on, I have a beautiful, crazy mother, God bless her. But I was literally conceived and born out of heartache. And I literally came out, I was premature, 2 months early. My mother's body could no longer hold me. She was drowning in her own heartache, in her own grief. As I was conceived, my parents had already broken up. And my tiny body, I think, just couldn't sustain the stress of her body and just said, I can't take this, I need out. And I want to bring in the understanding that our nervous systems come online very, very early on. And I'm not a doctor, so please don't quote me. It's usually around week 7 or 8. So very early on, we come into existence already sensing into the vessel that we're in. We are connected to it. And so imprinting already the story that my mother was holding of grief around loss and love. So eros had already had a braiding of fear within it. And as I came out into the world, I learned very, very quickly to, and I was a joyous, from what I understand, what I've been told was that I was a pretty happy baby, but I was very self-entertaining and self-efficient. I was wide open to life. And as babies, just like in the womb, a touch is one of the very first things that come online in terms of senses, right? And so when babies are born, they are one with the world around them. Everything is the infant is connected to the mother as it's connected to the mobile above them. And so I had learned very early on, as my mother cried quite literally over my father in heartache right on into my teenage years. But as an infant and a baby, I had already learned to that I carried my mother's heartbreak as if it were my own blood. And so I equated love with grief and the unsafety of it. So very young, I remember, and I actually remember this, watching my mother cry. And I made the vow that I would never would I allow someone to break me and break my heart in the way that my mother had experienced it. And so very early on, the identities already started to form. Sitting around the room with my mother's friends, talking about their loves, their losses, my own masks formed, my own understanding of sexuality, and also numbness pockets started to form. And I started to build an armor that looked at a very young age like capability. And this became part of my survival. Now, I am a being that had witnessed a lot with my mother, and I knew that I wanted something different, and so began a path of healing at a very young age. But I was still trapped in the cage of my own wiring of my nervous system. And if you understand that, that when we imprint, we are associating experiences together, right? So if sexuality comes with pleasure, then we're associating, oh, sex is pleasure. But if sex becomes, or aspects of it become tied to shame, for example, then we start to equate shame and sex, or pleasure and fear, etc. So I'm going to share pieces of poetry as we move through this, and this comes from a piece that I'm actually going to read to you in fullness at the end. But learning to survive and learning to be good on our own was something that became my mantra. And I had written, just because I don't have expectations doesn't mean I don't feel impact. Today, and again, for those of you who know, I'm holding my mother now in this paradox of freedom and safety. She's always been wild, she's been gypsy-hearted, and now the institutions call that non-compliant. And there's a part of me in love and panic and fear that just wants to unlatch every gate and just let her run. And then the other part of me is being the parent that I had been so used to, that I had been wired into my system at a very young age, that keeps me signing forms, that keep her contained, because that is another form of love showing up. And here's the truth, is that love isn't always pretty. It's not always compliant. It's the ache of choosing between two losses and staying human in the choosing. Because there are some nights that I fantasize that she'll have a Thelma and Louise exit to honor her drama, and also to honor the dignity of a soul who never wanted anything else but the open air. So how we are wired, as I was saying, our wiring for love starts before we even breathe air. And the atmosphere of the womb becomes our first love story. Grief and chaos teach the body to brace, and safety teaches it to soften. Our nervous system arrives early, as I was saying, and touches our first language, and babies don't differentiate between the outer world from their inner world. But then as life teaches, it teaches separation. And so even if you've had the best parents in the world and the best upbringing, good for you, you are still going to receive messages and belief systems from other family members, from friends, peers, school, religion, culture, etc. And it etches itself into our soma, into our body, into our cellular structure. And I was saying, shame then attaches itself to sensation. Rules attaches itself to desire. And we have these stories that are melded together. And we're unable then to just sit with the discomfort of sensation. And I think it's important at this point to mention that we all carry traumas, right? I think we sometimes think of trauma as something a very massive, immense event. And I don't want to start categorizing which traumas are bigger than others. But essentially, traumas are unprocessed stress cycles that get stuck in the body. And then imprint, how we are showing up or not showing up in the world. It becomes reactionary. How our system gets flooded and how we are constantly in protection of ourselves and where we find safety. We often think that we're the ones driving the bus, And I heard not so long ago, I love the explanation that our frontal cortexes, our logical thinking, are the place that we really go to rely on to give us the answers that we're looking for, is constantly lying to us, right? We think that we're here simply to grow. That is usually the desire. I want to be adventurous. And then we sabotage because something deeper within us is stopping us from moving forward. We can reason our way out of it, or we do something that then pulls us out of the possibility. For anybody who says, oh, I'm having trouble manifesting this, or I'm always attracting the wrong person, or I want to be in relationship, but then I hide and avoid, etc. And so that logic that we have up front is what clings to our survival's best interest first and foremost. And so that's why it's so important to start examining our belief systems, to start listening to the wisdom of our body. So this early learning shows up in what I'm going to call today as soul dialects. And I use the erotic blueprints, not as labels, and I'm not going to talk about it in the same way I have before, but more as living pathways that your body carved to keep you alive. And then also to transmute then into how you show up in love, right? When we look at like the 5 love languages, all of that, those are just blueprints that are imprinted into our bodies. And by the way, I think it's really important before I go on to say that nobody is a sentence to their blueprint. If you feel like, oh no, but I want to expand in other areas, like that is absolutely, that's you writing your own story. You get to become whoever you want to become. But first you have to understand how you're wired, and to be able to sit and move into new territory, new edges, create new neural pathways. And so in the first soul dialect, the energetic, there is this, as we know, there's this innate ability to be intuitive, to kind of, there's this arousal in the invisible, in the cosmic. It's the survival system of hunger for what can't be touched. It is space, anticipation. It is the voltage in the air. And what it also transmutes to is that a lot of times direct touch can be too much. That it is a beacon of safety, that it is a built-in system where many energetics can literally sense into another person's energy from across oceans, from great distances. And that comes from needing to be highly attuned. I mean, this is how incredible we are as humans and beings, is that our bodies will adapt in ways to form our survival. Unfortunately, then it goes into areas of our lives that we don't want. In the sensual, this dialect shows up as the devotion to beauty and texture, all of the senses, right? So the sensual in full glory is taking it in and gets nourished by the beauty of life, by everything they can see, touch, hear, taste, smell, the way clothing falls on their body, lighting candles. But in its destructive form, or in its more shadowed form, it can be latent with overwhelm. It can feel deprived, and the system can either collapse or numb with too much. The kinky is a really fun one because that plays in the energetic and the sensual, but always hitting the edges. And what makes the kinky blueprint so interesting in terms of survival and imprinting is that it naturally is looking for the edges. It is the blueprint that doesn't want to stay within societal rules. It looks for its own individuation. But with that also comes judgment, shame, and possibly going over the edge into destructive areas of not creating clear boundaries. The sexual is this beautiful in terms of survival. When you think of that, this soul dialect has this thirst for clarity and raw truth, simplicity, no frills, just skin and breath and presence. It also, in its distortion, can lock itself in a box, can become very rigid, doesn't have room for a whole lot of growth. And finally, there's the shapeshifter, which I say is the people pleaser of all of the blueprints. It's amazing because it's so adaptable, that oftentimes this is the blueprint also that can learn to move with whatever the situation is. And shapeshifters aren't just shapeshifters in their eroticism, like all of the blueprints, right? We carry all of these things, our eros, into everything that we do. It's not just in the bedroom. It's how we show up to work. It's how we put on our clothes or what we put on. It's how we eat the food that we eat. And so the shapeshifter's vast appetite can either become something that is insatiable, the well that is never fully fed. It can also become everyone's mirror and then starve in the people pleasing. So as I said, your blueprint isn't just who you are in bed. It's how your body has learned to survive love. And for those of you who already kind of sort of know me, then you would know that I'm an energetic kinky, also a shapeshifter. But from my very early on wiring, distance became eroticized, ache as turn on, absence as voltage. Especially when I began to do a lot of writing in my early years, I began to attach a pleasure to longing and distance. But that arisal, that arising of energetic for me came out of survival, because closeness once meant danger. And so I'm going to share with you a poem that I had written, which really, I think, is a beautiful way of explaining how the energetic works. If you have any shares that you ever want to bring forward in your experience of your own blueprint, please do share. I'm always happy to read it out. So the poem goes, I have loved you for so long. I close my eyes to see you next to me in this mysterious language of your skin against my breath. A cocktail of your masculinity and sweet cologne that spins me linguistically drunk, and how your love is intimate and protective. I have loved you for so long, vibrating in the stillness of foreplay before a single touch. The air warm, humming, and the buzz lingering from the sips of inhales rising. As I fumble on you, the velvety petals of my pussy blooming, luminous as crushed seashells into sand. Under the silvery lasso of the moon, calling for you. My lips cracking from dehydration and longing until the soft wetness of your mouth caresses mine. Like beach ripples, where ocean tongues scurry to reach you with my fingertips. So just because I move like water doesn't mean I don't carry the spillover. So for many years in acting class, I had often been criticized. It was, my constant feedback was that there was still a layer. It was a take off the mask. And I really thought that I thought I was showing up, and so I would just push harder. And I remember there were a couple of times there were these great exercises of literally taking, your hand and feeling the mask on your face, kind of like an alien. You feel if any of you have seen the movies Alien, that sucker that sucks at your face. And feeling into the mask that is there. And I remember someone saying, okay, now, take it off and see what's there. And I didn't understand at that time what it meant because my masks had been so strong. I had created identities, that armor that would protect me for a really long time. And I didn't understand. So I kept pushing harder, and thank goodness I had teachers who pushed back. And only later did I realize, did I feel the presence in my body. Because survival had taught me how to perform openness without actually inhabiting it. And there was a day that came that I really felt it in my body. And actually I have key moments where I really can see, a moment of being in a peace and feeling the authenticity shining through, where masks had completely dropped. And I could absolutely feel the shame, the heat of it moving through my body. And it was this incredible shame, but it was also paired with this incredible excitement that came with presence. And the room got very quiet. And that's when presence started to begin to show itself. There's another example that I want to bring in around wiring. So again, I was little, I think I was about 7 or 8, and I was staying at my cousin's house, and we were in the countryside. And, we're doing as little girls do. We were chatting away, and all of a sudden, the house started to shake. And I had never experienced anything like it. For those of you in California who are very used to it, I'd never known what a tremor felt like. And at the time, I was told, we were asked to come outside of the house, but not really told what it was. And so, when I said, oh, let's just go to the neighbors, I think I in my head, it was the boiler that was going to explode. That's what I had kind of told myself. And my uncle at the time said, no, it's like every house. And so then I had this thought in my head that every house had a boiler that was going to explode. And what really ended up happening in that experience was that the vibration recorded itself into my body. And so vibration would be a theme throughout my life that actually intensified as anxiety. And my survival instinct would then kick in, and panic attacks would happen, which then related to flying, movement and driving, even so much, anything that would create any kind of vibration, even, trucks going by and feeling the movement of the house. My whole system would go into some form of panic state. So all the logic in the world couldn't make those sensations go away. I had to learn to sit in the discomfort and start to pair breath, tapping into a sense of safety in my body, and start to breathe in my safety while in a state of panic, and starting to equate with different, rewiring different experiences so that fear could still show up, but now safety was also showing up, or that a sense of I could get through this, that I was safe in a moment. And for me, that looks like, as I spoke at the very beginning, around this eternal self, this immutable self, the self that for me would never, that is always present, found its safety in knowing that no matter what happened, that I could anchor into that space. And that is, when we start talking about rewiring, it's bringing in and pairing new experiences. So, for anyone who has gone through deep heartache and deep loss, it's not as simple as just saying, I love myself, I belong, I'm worthy of love. It's to start to feel the worthiness in your body while also accepting the sensations that come along with shame and unworthiness. So love in shadow. Jung has warned us that what we refuse to face rules us. The other way that I believe he said it was, what we resist persists. And we are often faced with things that keep recurring in our life. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my journey into healing, but what would continue to show up were my avoidances, my patterns of safety. And one of the patterns of safety for me was I ended up marrying a man I didn't particularly love, but my system had recorded as safe. And he wasn't particularly safe. But I had this sense of expectation from the people around me, again, belief systems. I had a young child and I was expected in some ways to marry someone. And so in my subconscious, I was acting out in a performative way, while holding true to the old wiring of I vow that nobody would break me as my mother had been broken. Which then brings me to say that this is something that shows up again and again, that we would rather give up our aliveness than risk abandonment, belonging, exile. But I want to introduce to you, that surface love is a famine with good lighting. So wherever you are in relationship, wherever it is that you're hiding, to start figuring out how to come back into your truth, into your authenticity. So not too long after, because I always say that my body has instant karma, and that I do not, my body is really loud when it's not in alignment with something. And it certainly wasn't in alignment with that marriage. And so that collapsed very quickly. And not too long after, I ended up meeting who would become my wife. And that experience cracked me open because it led into a pathway of deep healing. And I always say, being with a woman really helped me heal so that I could fully open to the divine masculine. And because today, in today's media, it is a lot around what love is supposed to look like. And I'm not saying that anyone should go past their boundaries or that love in any way is toxic or abusive at all. But there's a deeper truth to love, because we are all very, very human. That love doesn't have to be perfect to be alchemy. It just has to undo you enough so that you move towards something greater. Because culture keeps giving us the message that we're supposed to be whole before coming together, which is a beautiful idea. But it also becomes a perfection mask. Wholeness is not being polished. Showing up with love, embracing your sexuality, standing in your eros. That is standing in your power. That's honesty. It's presence inside the mess. So just because I'm good on my own doesn't mean I'm not worn from missing you. Ache as cathedral. So why do we worship unrequited love? Shakespeare made volumes and volumes of tragedies on it. Cinemas, rom-coms, dramas have built empires around. And all of these avoid the sacrament where love actually lives. That is, it is an ache. And that we call it poetry because longing is alive. Because ache is current, it is voltage. And an existential kink, and I love this book, invites us to ask the question that what if the pattern that you hate the most about yourself is secretly your turn on? Not to shame you, not to dismantle you, but actually to free you. And for myself, I had been trained in emotional distance. But from that emotional distance, I turned water into wine. I eroticized it. Ache became my cathedral. Absence, my kink. And I'm so aware of it today that I'm able to use it as nourishment and fuel. I also listen to it as a beacon, as my body warning me of, what is too much too fast? I can now come into my body with full honoring to be able to say, oh, no, I need things to go a little bit slower. So the very thing that broke me became what turned me on. So I believe it was last week. I don't know. Time seems to be going very, very strangely right now. But I had expressed my experience in shibari and talked about it. And talking about scaffolding, which has become a theme over the next little bit, I felt my scaffolding so incredibly strong. I could hold for endless amount of time, and I wasn't moving against something. I actually felt very solid, very present. So very much in that Tai Chi kind of flow where I could feel the strength of my legs beneath me. And I actually felt that I had the capacity to move with flow. But what happened right after that was very interesting because I collapsed, and I'm still recovering from the collapse of that. Because in my everyday, the truth is that I've gone back, my nervous system is being mirrored back my own childhood. I'm caretaking of my mom in a way. I have responsibilities that sometimes feel so great, so big, that I've come to see that I don't want to be the scaffolding, that I am looking for places to lean in so that I can allow for more breath and movement. And so for me, this experience of shibari and has been such a profound one because the rope mirrors. It's really quite magical. It showed me how much I hold for so much around me and how much my body is craving to stop holding. So there was the lesson that I'm strong enough to hold and I'm allowed to rest. COVID was such an interesting beast, wasn't it? Such an interesting wheel because it really put us in front of our mirrors. So if you were single, it brought out what it brought out, right? It could have brought out greater loneliness, but also in partnership, right? All of a sudden, everything is heightened. You're stuck with the people that even in the best of situations that you love and adore, you're mirrored in the places that still need work. And so it was a really intense time. And for me, COVID was that extra distance. And that distance, again, was a cathedral for me. I couldn't touch the man that I loved, and so I wrote poetry. I wrote poetry love letters, and I learned that the eroticism would thrive in me and keep me alive, and how a paragraph became a very delicious substitute for a kiss, and how comma can tease, and how absence makes room for devotion. So love, ironically, is something that we often settle into. And I'm going to tell you as an energetic, I think it's one of my absolute gifts, is that my imagination, it's not that I make things up, but there is a natural current that moves through me that keeps things alive because it's so sensitive to the essence around me. But oftentimes we do settle. We settle in love, we settle in our sexuality, we settle in our expressions, and we lose grasp on what love is, what our own eros is, our own expressions, and we stop acting from it. We stop acting from our essence. And throughout our lives, we start to build contracts that build us, but also block us from aliveness. And so I'm going to invite you for a moment, and this is kind of a fun thing, is to think of, if you've had them, not everyone has, but I think many of us have, had peak experiences. And so when you think of these incredibly peak, yummy, delicious experiences, what comes to mind in terms of what is branded in your soma, in your skin? And thinking of the flavors, the textures, the tones, the breath, the sounds. Because the peak experience, sometimes we equate it with a person or a place, but it evokes something in us. Were you seen, ravished, adored? Did you feel powerful, melted? Because those peaks reveal your soul dialect. And even if you haven't had the peak experience, right, that keeps bringing you back into that place of, oh, I want to experience that thing again. And you can think about peak fantasies. And some people say that they don't have peak fantasies, but even a romantic walk down a beach, feeling into someone else's hand, or feeling the wind on your skin is still a peak fantasy. So I'm just going to invite you to expand your idea and open your mind of what does it bring to you? Not just as a solitary idea, but bringing it and inviting it into your body. So maybe, and I'm going to mention that these peak experiences are often also coming from an imprinting. And an example might be, not the funnest one, but I think a lot of us can relate, is that maybe you were shamed around your sexuality. Masturbation, nobody wanted to see it, true story, but most of us were wired to have some form of shame around it. And so, there could be that sense of rushing, having to hide or rush through self-pleasure. And so maybe you hid your body, and now you find yourself prematurely ejaculating, trying to move through, or even though it's not what you want, but there's a sense of hiding or feeling that you need to go hide your sexuality, that there's a taboo or a secrecy that pulses your turn on. And none of it's wrong. It's all just information. Because when you start to understand where you've been imprinted and how that shows up, is where expansion starts to happen. Because we're not just looking for transformation. Transformation is lovely. Like I said, and in many ways, we hope that we're doing it all the time. What we're looking for is something even deeper than transformation, or the bigger transformations. And those transformations or those opportunities tend to show up somewhere around midlife, because our bodies kind of get to that edge of tolerance where we start to recognize that we only have so much in front of us, and we've suppressed so much, and our body starts to really leak in places, and it can show up in ways that we don't expect, including disease. So here's the part that I love, and there's many ways of rewiring. Today there's all kinds of techniques, but I think one of the most potent and most fun ways of repatterning and rewiring your nervous system, and being able to rewrite your story quite literally, and rewiring to connections, is through self-pleasure. It is through your sexuality. So bringing in elements like safety and pleasure to create more depth and connection. Because avoidance is starvation with an elegant outfit. So just because I know how to take care of myself doesn't mean I don't want to feel the safety of arms softening me into full openness. And I'm going to invite you in this moment to anchor into safety now. To take a moment to find one place in your body that even has this like little fraction of safety in it. And it can be anywhere in your body. But take a moment to name it, to breathe into it. And if safety is really something that you can't access, and I think most people can, but if there is deep trauma in the body, then I'm going to invite you to anchor into safety in something outside of yourself. Recognize that where you are in this moment is safe, right? So trauma is also about going back into the loop of the past. It's getting sucked into that vortex instead of staying very present. So the sensations might be uncomfortable, but the event is over. So as you sit in this presence and finding that little bit of safety, just whispering to yourself, I am safe, right here. And if and when you choose, this is the real magic, is that you can start to bring in self-pleasure, which really magnifies healing and wiring. Don't leave the anchor of safety, allowing for whatever shows up to show up. And it might be fear, it might be shame, but anchoring it to something else that might be pleasure or safety will start to undo some of that old conditioning. You're teaching your body, even with big feeling, I am held. Right? This has been a lot. I haven't stopped talking. I only do that on dates. Terrible thing to say. Anyway, I'm gonna just continue because we don't have much time left, and I'm just going to invite some poetry. I no longer kneel at the altar of sacrifice. I no longer pray to absence as if it were God. I hold love in my bones and still walk into the sun. I can be wrecked and still show up in my aliveness. I can ache and still choose love. Love is not my jailer anymore. It is my pulse. I love that. So as a creative, as an energetic, I know that aliveness often lives in the in-between, in rooms prepared with intention, in the way we court the field itself. I'm aware that opposites attract and then often call themselves incompatible. But the bridge is devotion to one's practice without demanding the other match it. Love will never make complete sense. Mystery is part of the beauty of love. But love without presence is just a haunting. And showing up as love is presence, whatever it looks like. Showing up as love is courage. Showing up as love may include trembling. You know, I had this conversation with my son a couple of days ago, and we were talking about what love is and what self-love is. Because as I said at the top of this, which is, you know, we're in a culture where we're just saying, Post-it notes everywhere to remind ourselves to love ourselves. But loving yourself isn't just around saying a bunch of pretty words and saying words that are just kind of feel good. And for myself, you know, it was coming to those places where, being on the floor with the mascara running down and not wanting anybody to show up, recognizing of like, oh my God, if I actually had somebody in my life right now, I would not want them to see this, right? These are parts of me that feel gross and icky, and feeling my own exile of myself, that desire to be something else, feeling like there's something wrong with me. But coming into full love of oneself means taking all of those pieces that feel gross and the parts that we don't want to be with, and saying, I love you, even though this is showing up. Because all of these pieces are a part of me. They are part of my story. Excuse me. And in that vein of what we resist persists, the more we push those parts away, the more they control us, the more those parts become the puppeteer, and we are not the drivers of our own bus. So my questions to you before we end this evening, and thank you for showing up, and if you've made it this long, is what vow did you make in childhood? And if this applies to you, where does your body eroticize absence? But you can change the word absence for where does your body eroticize the taboo, raw, unfiltered sex, speaking, I'm having trouble like forming words, having dirty talk. And what shame are you feeding instead of tending? So I'm going to finish this off with parts. I was reading it out throughout this evening. I'll just finish this evening with the poem L'amour infini. And it goes like this. Just because I don't need you doesn't mean I don't feel the drought of you. And just because I move like water doesn't mean I don't carry the spillover. Just because I'll never want you to be anything more other than who you are doesn't mean I don't want more of you. Just because I don't have expectations doesn't mean I don't feel impact. And just because I am free doesn't mean I don't desire belonging. And just because I'm good on my own doesn't mean I'm not worn from missing you. And just because I've learned to surrender to an unknown path doesn't mean you're not still the barrel of my light, and that accepting what is doesn't mean I'm indifferent. Just because this is truth beyond my comprehension doesn't mean I made it up. And everything I write, every word woven of you is hallowed sutra, unspinning the spell that knows my heart prays to the sound of yours beyond this body, beyond form. And just because I trust the dark doesn't mean I don't feel the aloneness of an unshared life. And just because I know how to take care of myself doesn't mean I don't want to feel the safety of arms softening me into full openness. It is because I know grief. I am so in love with life, so in love with being so alive in this skin, and you are the one I want to feel it with. No matter the distance I hold, the longing and the love of you. And just because it is easier to be blind doesn't mean I'm deaf to the silence. And just because I love you always isn't permission for cool carelessness. And it doesn't mean I don't know when to let go, because love without presence is just a haunting. The only thing I know to be true is this. is that this love holds no leash, but still bleeds stars. I was born out of heartbreak, but I have chosen and will continue to always choose love over and over until my last breath. This is presence. This is aliveness. This is love. Thank you for joining me tonight. Thank you for listening to Skin and Soul with me, Gwenm. Join me Fridays at 10 a.m. PST on Transformation Talk Radio. Catch the podcast anytime on your favorite platforms. You can follow me on Instagram @Luvology. Ready to take the next step? Book a compatibility call with me at gwenmcarsley.com.